Okay, good evening all. We do finally have a quorum, although we will verify that, but looks like it's maybe a minute or so past 6:30. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and ask for the roll call, please, Tammy.
Goss,
Present.
King, Marsh, Patterson, Petrie,
Present.
Furtado, Esri.
Here, and I will just note that Mr. King has an activity or activities with his kids tonight, so that's why he's not here. Move on then to approval of agenda and addenda. Is there such a motion? Moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Mr. Goss. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. We'll move on then to public participation. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, I skipped again. Move on then to approval of minutes from the ELEC committee meeting for February 8th, 2018. Move to approve as presented by Mr. Goss, seconded by Ms. Petrie. Discussion on those. Trying to move the meeting on too quickly. Seeing no discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, those are approved. Now we'll get to public participation. Only have the one thus far. We have Mr. Chris Storr. Mr. Harkey, we can have you too. Just ask that before you leave, maybe fill out a participation sheet. It's over by the front door. It's just part for the record. And Mr. Storr, I know you know the routine, but if you would just, again, for the record, state your name and address when you sit down, please.
Thank you. My name is Chris Storr, and I live at 405 East High Street in Urbana, Illinois. And I come before you on a topic that is not on the agenda, but I want to think that it is this particular committee's purview. The Muhammad Aquifer Protection Task Force met recently, and I attended the meeting, and the task force has a number of members on it, from a state representative, 2 senators, and a number of representatives from the Farm Bureau, municipalities, public interest groups, and so forth, but no counties. No counties. Out of all of the counties that overlie and draw their water from this sole source aquifer. I would suggest that the issues of groundwater quality are not just reserved for municipalities, but for all of us, including the rural areas and those municipalities not represented on the task force. For your information, the task force has decided to extend their purview, their work from the end of June to the end of 2018, and that Senator Chapin Rose does not want this to be a one-time study, but a permanent official standing group. They are setting up committees to look at a specific list of topics, including a groundwater restriction ordinance, recharge areas, gas storage, landfill contamination, withdrawals and irrigation, and road salt, among other topics. Public health and economic development are a concern for this body. I recommend that that this committee and the county board need to send an observer to meetings and report back to the county board on the activities of the task force and their committees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Patsy?
Could we suspend the rules so Susan Monty can?
going
you
to
think?
ask her if
Okay.
I have no problem with that if there's no objection to suspending the rules a little bit, because if you have no objection, Susan, I know you're the kind of the one with the most knowledge of this at this point in time. If you want to choose to speak any.
Well, it's interesting that no county officials are on the task force, and county representation is an important kind of consideration. I don't have any additional information. Chris Storr was at the meeting, and nothing appears on the website for that task force that explains what happened during the meeting. So that was good input, I think. So one option would be to have the county planning contract be looked at by John Hall and RPCs to see if perhaps a staff person could attend these meetings and report back. Already, I'm the staff person who attends the Muhammad Aquifer Advocacy Alliance Summit, which is a once-a-year thing, and half the time I'm informing them about what's going on. So, anyway, yes, I think it needs to be discussed further with John Hall as to who would go, and of course it's a county board, ELUC decision, ultimately.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Thank you, Mr. Storr. Move on then to Mr. Ted Harkey. And Chris, turn the microphone off if you push the lowest, closest button right there in the middle. You're on.
Will you please turn your packets to pages 10, 11, and 12? I feel like I'm going to do the gospel reading or something here. The way that sounded. Okay. My name's Ted Harkey. I used to live in Vermilion County. They built wind turbines around my house. My family and I suffered severe sleep deprivation. The wind company turned off the wind turbines 51 nights for the first 5 months it was in operation. After they refused to turn them off, the sleep deprivation persisted. They did a noise study at my house. The noise study was just barely like a half a decibel below the maximum noise limit allowed in all of Illinois. And that measurement was at the location of my house and not out at the property line. My wife and I, we abandoned our home. We moved into a double-wide trailer. We lived there for a year and a half. We bought another house, and this house happens to be in Champaign County. We moved there. We lived in it for in our new house here in Champaign County for a year and a half. And we finally sold our old house in Vermilion County. My wife and I lost probably in the magnitude of $100,000. Through all of that, I learned a lot about what noise limits mean and how loud something can be before it causes sleep issues. On this page 10, I wrote an email to John Hall. I wanted this group to look at these noise limits very carefully. When they built the wind farm, there's a company called HDR Engineering, and in the application for Invenergy's wind project, they said in the application, I have it underlined and circled in red, with the conservative additions, the analysis indicates that majority of locations, that means houses, would experience turbine sound levels of less than 40 dBA outdoors. This level is sufficiently low to minimize or eliminate any potential for sleep interference. So less than 40 dBA is what the engineering company in Vermilion County's application said to keep it below. The noise measurements at my house are 45, okay? If you go to page number 11, the top portion of this page shows a chart. This chart was created by an individual named Steve Ambrose. Steve Ambrose is an acoustician who works in the northeast part of the country, up in Maine and Vermont area. He has responded to a lot of community complaints about wind turbine noise in particular, and he put together this guideline chart. And this has been out for probably 2 or 3 years and has never been challenged by any wind company. No one has denied that this is a good chart to follow. All of the black dots on this chart are noise level studies done by the EPA during the 1970s. Every black dot is a different study where the EPA has charted or kept track of a noise limit measured whenever there were complaints filed by citizens because of industrial activity or trains or other noise sources. And if you look on this chart, I want you to look at the big red arrows. The widespread complaints start at 33.5 dBA. At 40 dBA, you see a note that's in a white box that says LOAEL. That stands for the lowest observed adverse effect level. That's where health effects begin to have problems. The most common health effect from noise is sleep deprivation or sleep interruption. I would like for you to look at where I have a long line up at the 50 dBA level. There are a lot of rules placed where the top noise limit is at 50 dBA. That's typically along interstate highways. And that's not a fair thing to do to someone who lives in a rural area and make their noise limit 50 dBA, because even at night the interstate dies down. There's very few cars on the interstates. The issue with the wind turbines around my house is they ran all day and all night, and there was never a way to get away from it. In the bottom 2/3 of this sheet, this is a snapshot or a snip from Dr. Paul Schomer. This is straight from his testimony he gave in Boone County, Illinois, sometime during 2016. And I want you to look at what his red text in here says. It says the nighttime level and indeed the 24-hour level, and that's because we're dealing with noise sources that run all the time. At most, it should be less than or equal to 39 decibels. So I'm showing you a chart where Steve Ambrose created the line at 40 decibels, where that's the first observed health effect. HDR Engineering, when they applied for the wind farm project in Vermilion County, they called out 40 dBA as the maximum noise limit. And I want you to go on to page 12. If you want to know how far away something needs to be based on how loud it is, there's a chart here. Right at the noise source, let's say you have something really loud, like a wind turbine, and it runs at 102 dBA. 1 foot away from the wind turbine, 102 dBA. As you get further from a wind turbine, the noise is lessened. Every time you double the distance away from a noise source, the noise goes down by 6 dBA. For instance, if you want to follow along with this one, 2 feet away, it's already down at 96. 4 feet away, it's at 90. If you get 64 feet away, it's already down to 66 dBA. And if you look down lower on the chart, there's a number that's about 2,048 feet, gets you down to about a 36 dBA noise limit. When Dr. Schomer was in Boone County, I want to read this red portion to you. Boone County established a half-mile setback from wind turbines based on this statement. These calculations are all for hub power elevation level of 102 decibels. If the selected wind turbine had a different power, then all these numbers go up or down by the difference between the power of the selected wind turbine and 102. I want to point something else out. Above that, it says the distance that corresponds to 34 dBA is nearly half a mile. The reason why Dr. Schomer was throwing a 34 dBA noise limit here was because he wanted 95% of the noise not to exceed 39 decibels. And all of this is relative now because I looked at your solar panel ordinance and I was shocked to see that the noise from solar panels, the noise limit was going to be in the magnitude of, I think it said 50 or 60 dBA. I want you to look at your, it was, I think it was in the suggested solar ordinance that came from, I think, Kankakee County. And when I saw it, that was really frightening to me. And I believe that this county should, right away, before any applications are put in place for any wind turbines or solar panels or anything else that makes a lot of noise 24 hours a day or runs often, where it's nearby people's homes and they can't escape from it. I'm rambling on, but I'd like to see that all reduced to be a maximum limit of 39. And if you did that, I believe I would have been able to stay in my home and not have to have lost the use of my house and my bedrooms, and not had my wife and my kids go through sleep deprivation for almost a whole entire year. This is a very important thing to me. I've lived nearby here, and I've worked in Champaign, Urbana, Danville areas for more than 18 years. I've never come to my county to ask anything for myself. And if this is the only thing I ever asked for, and if I got this, I think I'd be fairly satisfied, and I would be very appreciative that we wouldn't let this happen to any other families. I'm sure I went over my 5-minute limit. I'd be more than glad to entertain any kind of questions you guys have. I'm an open book.
We don't generally do that during public participation, but if you're willing to stick around when we get to we do have the zoning ordinance noise limits on the agenda.
Okay.
Then we can have an interaction
I'd be
back
pleased
and forth.
to stick around, and you guys suspend your rules or whatever you'd like to do to interact.
We don't really have to suspend the rules for that. It's just during
Okay.
the public when we don't really have an interaction. So that was why we kind of just agreed to, you could say, kind of suspend the rules to let Susan speak to what Mr. Storr was saying at the time. But it's fairly early in the agenda.
Okay,
So.
thank you. And the gentleman that went before me, I would ditto everything he said. I think that he is on to something there. So I would support his stuff too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harkey. Oh, okay, that's the only public participation slips I have, and I know the gentleman and the other gentleman in the audience is for the subdivision case that we have coming up in case we have questions of him, the item 10. So he doesn't have anything to speak to us at this point in time during public participation. We'll move on then to communications. Are there any communications? I'll just note that John Hall isn't here tonight. He's at the Farm Bureau talking to the Land Use Committee. So we have Miss Susan Bergstrom here. She's filling in. She's done this before, not very often, but she has filled in before. So that's why John Hall's not here. We'll move on then to 7 for information only. We have A, the land resource management conditions relevant to Champaign County, 2018 annual update. Ms. Monty.
Thank you. So each year I look back at the most key developments or conditions that occurred during that previous year. In this case, it would be during 2017, and I would have to say all of the drama about the new e-waste law and its final enactment was a pretty key development. And so this memorandum summarizes why that is such an important new law. It changes to a convenience standard whereby any county in Illinois could access and choose to opt in to an electronics e-waste program. Still, that county would need to pay for operational costs to either hold one-day events or to have a collection site. So previous to this, once the funds ran out in this program, access to these kind of e-waste programs was not available. So as you've heard me talk over the past several years, the previous program was just not sustainable. So this is a move in the right direction. And so that's the first of two key trends or developments or conditions. I wanted to bring to your attention, again, the need for HHW collection, household hazardous waste collection, and that is not only a challenge here in Champaign County, but in most downstate counties. So we continue to acknowledge that, and we are working with a team of volunteers at RPC to try to address this problem here in Champaign County, and to either try to arrange for providing one-day collection on an interim basis, to expand collection options for unwanted pharmaceuticals, and ultimately, the ultimate goal would be to develop a permanent HHW collection facility. So there's more information about the need, which is pretty well established here. There's one correction to this memorandum, and that was I, by mistake, in the first paragraph under HHW collection, gave the wrong statistic for how much Champaign County how much potential there is in Champaign County to generate HHW per year. And the statement should instead have read, the average U.S. household generates more than 20 pounds of household hazardous waste per year. So I will make that correction to the record. That's about it. I just wanted to bring those two conditions that occurred primarily during 2017 and continue to your attention this year.
Thank you, Susan. Discussion on this. Ms. Petrie?
Quick question. How do you see the situation, say, in 5 years?
Well, I tend to be an optimist, and I think there's a lot of groundswell support to try to address this problem, even in this difficult time in the economy of the county and perhaps for the municipalities. So I see this need being addressed. I know a permanent facility may not be possible within 5 years, but I certainly think there will be an organized effort to bring this to fruition, this HHW collection need. In fact, I'll just add one more note that was sort of interesting. Today I came across a memorandum from the city of Champaign back in 1992 when they withdrew from the original Joint Action Agency that was addressing solid waste issues, and they called out HHW collection as a need for cooperative intergovernmental, I got that backwards, for the governments to address on a cooperative basis. So I was sort of pleased to see that at least was acknowledged back in 1992. And nothing has happened, I know it's crazy, but I think things need to happen. Other counties in the region are also taking action. So we can't depend on the Illinois EPA. They've indefinitely suspended their one-day HHW collection program. So there's no use even thinking about waiting for one of those. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on then to B. We have the update regarding IEPA used tire collection for local governments. Susan?
So as you may have seen, we had a chance to get another one of these used tire collections. Illinois EPA has a very good used tire collection program for local governments, units of local government. So that's one of their bright spots, I think. And so this was put together relatively quickly. We have Keith Padgett, the Township Highway Commissioner for Champaign County. Did I say Champaign County? I meant to say Champaign Township. He likes to cooperate and provide a site for these collections, and so he was gracious to have all of the tires delivered there, and they were just picked up this Monday. So it was another successful collection at no cost to the county or a township.
Thank you. Ms. Petrie?
Okay, I have an obvious question. You just said the Illinois EPA is sort of on a downhill run, yet this program, which you described as extremely successful. So what is the differential, and how can we figure out how to capture whatever makes tire collection so successful in relationship to hazardous waste?
Well, that's completely out of our control, and I can't really speak of the used tire program as being extremely successful. It's just that we've managed to score 2 collections within 3 years. So really, it is out of our control. Who knows what goes on at the Illinois EPA? I mean, I cannot address that question to your satisfaction.
Ms. Furtado?
I have a few suggestions. First of all, the scope. I mean, this is just the tires right from the county. Is that correct? It's not public. So it's a much, much more narrowly confined program, right? It's just from the municipalities and the county. So it's not just open to the public. Secondly, there is reuse for tires, right? There's all sorts of tire recycling, from roads to playgrounds to all sorts of things that would incentivize tire collection in a way that hazardous waste material just simply doesn't have. So those would be my 2 speculations as to, one is a much more narrow program, so much more affordable, and 2, there's an end game for tires that is not there for hazardous waste that would incentivize the collection. That would be my guess.
Thank you, Ms. Furtado. I think those are probably pretty good observations. Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move then on to C. We have the zoning ordinance noise limits for wind farms and solar farms. Susan, did you have anything that you wanted to comment on, or that John wanted you to point out, or anything at this point in time?
There we go. This time, we just wanted to make sure that Mr. Harkey's communications came to the ELUC committee, so that they could be aware of the concerns that he has, and I'm sure other people have, about the noise levels related to solar power, as we're about to undertake what are likely to be several projects in our county. I think that it's important to point out that our current proposed ordinance for solar farms is that there be compliance with the Illinois Pollution Control Board. And so I don't know the details of what that means, but it is something that, you know, we're trying to make sure that these concerns are addressed in the ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Discussion from the committee, and if Ms. Petrie.
Yes, and if Mr. Harkey be willing to come forward.
Just, of course, turn your microphone on again. That's all we ask. Thank you, Ted.
I wasn't aware that the solar panels made so much noise, so how can we get a little bit more information about that aspect? Or maybe Susan already has it in hand. Do you?
I don't have it in hand, but I know that we have been researching it. We've also taken comments from residents and the solar companies that are interested in coming to our area in terms of what kind of noise is produced by these solar panels. And what we've heard so far generally is that they don't make much noise at all relative to a wind turbine. But since we can't speak to that at this moment, I'm not going to say we're going to discount this because of what some people say.
Mr. Harkey, go ahead.
Okay. I think, Ms. Petrie, the first thing that you should request from the solar companies is to get their health and safety manual from all of their elements. The thing that makes noise in a solar farm is going to be the inverter and the transformers. And I expect those noises will probably be in a humming, constant humming noise, louder when the sun is brighter and silent at night, most likely. What shocked me was that on one of the first go-arounds, when I saw the preliminary cookbook ordinance that was submitted to the county to follow, the noise limit was way up. I think it was more than 50, or it could have even been 60. And when I saw that, I thought, what are they going to do? Are they going to put an inverter or a transformer immediately on the property line outside the window of a bedroom of a kid next door? And I thought of my own kids, and I thought, someone has to say something. Nobody thinks that solar panels are going to be noisy. Here's what's really good about the solar farm. They're going to be huge, right? We have one is it going to be 1,300 acres?
1,200.
1,200 acres. Okay, it's huge. That's great. They can put their inverters and their transformers and all that stuff out in the very middle of the section. It'll be a half mile from people's homes. The other thing that's good about it is these things are on the ground. You can put fences, noise barrier, some kind of noise retardant item, a noise wall around these items, so that way it doesn't cross the property line and cause people to be offended by the noise and the buzzing and the humming. I would encourage all of you to go to the east edge of Sydney. There's kind of a junkyard there where there's an old junk semi-trailer and it has bad four-letter word graffiti on the side of it. Pull into that driveway, get out of your car, turn your car off, get out of your car, sit there, stand there for 20 minutes, and you won't believe how much humming comes from the substation that's about a quarter mile east of there. I might be more sensitized to that, but it was very, very noticeable for me. And that's how I imagine 2 square miles of solar panels to sound like. So I'd like for you to err on the side of caution, require the solar companies to put their stuff onto the interior of their footprint, anything that makes noise. And I think that they would laugh and think it's totally cool to stay below this 39 decibels that I've advocated for. I think they can easily do that. And if they can't, then I think you have a very bad company trying to sell something to you. As a side note, I'm a land surveyor, and we've done some real hard work to create a lot out onto some prime farm ground that's not 1/100 of an acre, more than 3 acres. And I do have some mixed feelings about 2 square miles of solar panels happening all of a sudden, where I don't know if in my lifetime I could do enough rural surveys where I took out 2 square miles of farmland for people to have their homes and raise kids out in the country in this awesome county. So with that, I'd like for you to maybe backpedal a little bit on using up this farm ground that the surveyors like Dave Ashley and I are really working hard to keep preserved, following our county rules. So I'm rambling on. Please cut me off whenever I do that.
Ms. Petrie, go ahead.
Well, a follow-up to some of the information he shared. There are plenty of solar farms already in existence around the country. And we have one out at the university where some measurements could be done. I know Scott Willoughby, the physics professor, has put the solar panels on his roof, and he's been measuring all the aspects of those solar panels. They have them in Europe. So I would really be interested in having information brought to ELUC that helps us appreciate or understand better noise levels that are being measured at these various entities across the country where the solar panels already exist. And I'm not sure that it's 1,200 acres, but they're large, they're large entities that I have been looking at where there are solar farms out there. And it would be good for us to get a handle on this. Does it vary as to the manufacturer of the solar panels? Is it affected by the companies that are installing them? Can any of the inverters and transformers be buried so that it helps modulate some of the noise? you mentioned barrier plantings around there, which would help modulate some of the noise. So those are all things as we have more in-depth consideration of the solar ordinance that probably would help us tremendously to start getting that kind of information. And appreciate very much your sharing with us some of your thoughts, which help kick off our thinking a bit.
Previously, you mentioned the Illinois Pollution Control Board noise limits. I want to remind you again that when the wind turbine noise was measured at my home, they were 0.5 decibels, or approximately that much, below that maximum noise limit. The Pollution Control Board noise limits were created, I think, in the early 1980s, before anyone fathomed wind turbines or solar panels that are a 24-hour noise producer. Well, let's not throw solar panels in that. Of course, they're not going to make noise at night. But a wind turbine is day and night, and since it's a 24-hour noise producer, it needed to have a nighttime noise limit that would be safe for people's sleep. In my packet I sent to you was Dr. Schomer's information. I think Dr. Schomer is 90 years old. He lives in Champaign. He was when the Illinois Pollution Control Board limits were put in place, he was on that panel when those were first put in place. I think he's the only living person that was on that panel that's still around, and he lives here in Champaign on Roberta Drive, I believe. And he's testified in many cases against wind farms that this 39 decibels is the maximum noise limit that they should be, and that includes the pulsating noise. With the wind turbine, you have a moment of quietness in between the blade pass, and then you have the blade. And wind companies like to average out their noises. And since it was only half a decibel below the maximum noise limit on the IPCB noise limit octave band chart, what was hurting us was the averages. It was very loud 1 second and quiet the next second. And over that duration of time, and average these all out, well, it averages out pretty nice. And that was the issue that we ran into with our wind turbines next to our house.
Mr. Marsh.
Thank you for your comments, and I would, second yours, we really just need to get more information. Just as a wind turbine, the noise at 1 foot is 102. Is this 50 or 60 a maximum? Where is that maximum? Where's that noise at? So we just need more information to make a good decision, but do appreciate your question. Thank you, Patsy.
Mr. Goss.
Yeah, I would second that, but I think we need to be careful. I don't want to start measuring at the U of I solar farm because you've already got a bunch of noise pollution there. It's going to be a lot different in the countryside where you've got open space and you're just, it's a lot quieter there to begin with. So, you're not going to notice a solar farm in Champaign. It's not going to make any noise different than cars that are there constantly. So I think we need to be a little closer to the countryside, and there are some within an hour or two at most. I know Streeter's got a 40-acre farm, so I was up there, visited that farm last year at this time, but honestly I didn't think about noise, so there are places where we could certainly do that.
Thank you, Mr. Goss. Further discussion? Would you like to add anything right at the end, Mr. Harkey?
I feel like I have a undivided attention here. I want to point out that the wind turbines near my house, the closest one was 1,665 feet away. The second closest was 2,225 feet away. The one that's 2,225 feet away was located southwest of my home, and that's the direction that the prevailing winds are blowing from. And we were almost most of the time in the exhaust downwind of that wind turbine. And if you go out there in the daytime, I'm telling you, it doesn't seem like a big deal. And it was at nighttime when there was shear wind, and the upper wind would be faster than the lower level winds, and that causes those blades to flex. And when a blade flexes forward and back, it lets out a small air pressure pulse, and that air pressure pulse doesn't seem like a big deal outside your home, but inside of our house, it was a thumping and rumbling noise, like heavy bass subwoofer type of a noise. And I know that solar panels don't make heavy bass subwoofer type noises, but when I saw that we're going to open the ordinance, you're going to study how much noise comes from these things, I would like for you to look at nearby counties who have had hundreds of hours of zoning board hearings and meeting minutes and expert witnesses and people like me who have explained exactly what happened and what the circumstances were at our homes. I would like for you to heed to those testimonies. Livingston County, Illinois is one example. In Livingston County, Illinois, they happen to put in a wind turbine setback in most of the townships at 3,250 feet, I think. In Boone County, Illinois, they set the setbacks at a half mile from people's property lines. And those counties went through a lot of work and a lot of expenses to get to those levels. In counties like what we have here, I think our setback here is 1,200 feet. Those were probably okay setbacks for when turbines were only 300 or 350 foot tall, like they have over in Bloomington. That was probably okay for those height turbines. But now, the next turbines coming here are going to be up in Paxton. They're 650 foot tall. A 1,200 foot setback is not near reasonable for a 600 foot tall wind turbine. If you have your ordinance open, I would like to have these things done almost at the same time, where you guys take care of some of these items. Because if a wind company came in here tomorrow and they put their application on your desk, you're stuck with the Illinois Pollution Control Board maximum noise limit, which caused me to abandon my home. You're stuck with a 1,200 foot setback, which should not be used and is not appropriate for a 600 foot tall turbine. I don't mean to carry on and go ahead and cut me off, Aaron. I don't want this to happen to anybody else, what happened to us.
Thank you. Ms. Petrie, one final.
Yes, one final question. Do you know of any wind turbine ordinances that we could look at as a model that has varying setbacks depending on the height of the turbine? I'm a little concerned if we set it at, say, half a mile or 3,500, and it's a 300-foot turbine as compared to the taller ones, okay?
In Iroquois County, Illinois, I believe that their ordinance is 10 times the rotor diameter of the wind turbine. And the reason they went with rotor diameter is because it will account for the longer blades, which may flex more and cause more of this air pressure pulse when those blades wobble in and out of the upper and lower winds. I've been seeing communities go towards the multiplier of rotor diameter because that will give you a variable distance depending on if your turbine's 10 foot tall or 1,000 foot tall. And I think that will solve that problem. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Harkey. Any other final discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on then. And thanks again, Mr. Harkey. Sure.
When you see Iroquois County's wind ordinance, I think you're going to see a noise limit of 30 at night and 35 in the day. You'll see some very strict noise limits in Iroquois County. Theirs may be the most strict. The reason why that county ended up with such a strict ordinance is because one of their county board members lives 1 mile from a wind turbine, and his name is Marvin Sticknot. I think it's spelled Stichnoch. You know Mr. Sticknot. When it became public that my wife and I told people that Invenergy were shutting down the wind turbines at night so we could sleep, that's when I met Marvin for the first time, because he came up to us and he said they're a mile from him and he can't sleep in his house either. Okay.
Thanks. Yep, I believe we're done with that topic.
Thank you for all the time you spent with me. I appreciate it very,
Yep.
very much.
Thank you. We'll move then on to line 8. We have items to receive and place on file by ELUC to allow for 30-day review period. We have the proposed minor amendments to the Land Resource Management Plan. Ms. Monty?
Thank you. In your packet, you had received a first draft of this, and tonight I distributed a second draft, and I thought I would be able to do that since this is being held for 30 days. I wanted to just provide a very basic overview of what's going on with the solid waste here in Champaign County. So that's what this attachment A that you see is, essentially expands upon what you received in your packet. This would be added to the end of Chapter 5 of existing conditions of the Land Resource Management Plan. And as solid waste does impact land, air, and water if it's mismanaged, this is a pretty critical addition, just to provide an overview. It doesn't replace the Solid Waste Management Plan. That's a separate plan. It just provides basic information about what's going on. So that's this handout. Then to Volume 2, each year we update the land use management area map. And this year there's, so far, I see no additional annexed municipal property. And I wanted to just mention that. The only change would be the date of the map, if need be. I'm going to double check with the GIS consortium to make sure that their GIS data is updated. I'm using the layer that is most recent for municipal annexations, and I'm not seeing a change from the last map. The last update was in June of 2017, and this is March. So maybe that layer needs to be updated, and I'll double check that just to be sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Discussion on this. Ms. Petrie.
Referring back to Ms. Furtado's response to me about why one program has more roots than the other program, can you talk to us a bit about what are the financial benefits to any company that comes in and does any of this waste pickup and the hazardous waste, so I can better understand what are the potentials of leveraging improvements on it?
Well, to the degree that I think I understand your question, my response would be the reason HHW has been a problem ever since it's been identified and tried to be addressed is because there is no marketable commodity generally from purchase of HHW. So it's not a profitable business. That's why nobody's doing it. So I don't know if that helps you understand. And the processing costs are sky high because, of course, these are hazardous materials. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but those are my perspectives on the topic of business of HHW collection, if that's what you were zeroing in on.
Well, I am zeroing in on that. So from your response to me, then my sub-question would be, what is industry doing to lower the amount of hazardous waste and products, or even getting to the point that they would be eliminated, not tomorrow or the next day, but
Yeah.
5 and 10 years down the line, since there has not been anything over on the other side that can turn it into a profitable aspect. I agree, tires get recycled in many different ways, so that's a real boon on recycling the tires and keeping them out of the ditches, et cetera.
Well, that's a very good question, and I do follow product stewardship quite compulsively. It's a fascinating topic, and Canada is way ahead of the U.S. in this regard, as is Europe. So nothing much happening here in the U.S. yet. It's on the radar, and it ties in with the zero waste movement. Household hazardous waste is a solid waste, and it's always going to be a challenge. So,
Further discussion? Seeing none, we will receive and place that on file for the 30-day review period. We'll then move on to 9 items to be approved by ELUC. We have the annual renewal of recreation and entertainment license for the Tin Cup RV Park Incorporated, 1715 East Tin Cup Road, Mahomet, for the period 1/1/2018 through 12/31/2018. Is moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Mr. Marsh. Is there any discussion on this?
I do have a question. Just for the record, I'm assuming that this has been reviewed by, okay.
I think Mr. Hall said in his email that, yeah, it had been reviewed by the sheriff, and if I recall correctly, I'm pretty sure, yeah. Okay, if no other further discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. We'll then move on to line 10, items to be recommended to the county board. We have A, subdivision case 199-18, Icorst subdivision, final plat approval of a 1-lot minor subdivision for an anticipated contractor's facility to be located in the southwest quarter of Section 18 of Township 20 North, Range 9 East, in Summer Township, and located adjacent to the IDOT Highway Maintenance Facility on Leverett Road. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Mr. Marsh. Discussion on this, and we do have Mr. Ashley, if we have questions for him that he can potentially answer. Ms. Petrie.
Well, it's just for it to be on the record, which I say every time I have concerns, because this expansion is on prime farmland. And if we're worried about covering farmland for solar panels, I think we need to be worried about covering prime farmland for other things. And one of the things that I've asked for before, and we don't seem to get it, supplied to us, is the economic balance of this. This is economic development. It's a business that'll be an expansion. And how does that juxtaposition to the economic value of that land as farmland?
Speak, if you don't mind, Mr. Goss.
So it's $400 of net revenue from the farmland. Best case scenario. It's 2 acres. That's it. So I would hope that the business would generate more than $400.
Any further discussion on this?
Thought you were a better farmer, Mr. Goss.
Well, unless maybe medical marijuana, if you could get a grow operation.
Yeah, if you put medical marijuana on this, it would be significantly different.
Now that we've gone there.
Maybe that's what we should be urging. I think Colorado is doing much better because of all of it.
If no further discussion.
I just have to say, Mrs. Petrie, we need to talk about the social impact as well.
If there's no other, I guess, serious discussion, I'm the one that initially brought up, but I did bring up medical, not just recreational. If no further discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. Of course, it can be pulled off by anybody off the consent agenda if need be. Somebody. We'll then move on to Mr. Ashley. At this point in time, it's recommended to be approved to the county board. So we'll then move on to B. We have the zoning case 873-AT-17. Amend the text of the zoning ordinance as follows. Part A, amend sections 7.1.1 and 7.1.2 to require a special use permit for any neighborhood home occupation or rural home occupation that exceeds and or does not meet the other requirements of section 7.1.1 or section 7.1.2, provided that the home occupation is not a prohibited home occupation under paragraph 7.1.1.I or 7.1.2.J, and specify that the residential use shall remain the principal use on the property and the dwelling on the subject property shall remain the principal building. And Part B, amend section 7.1.1 to authorize minor auto repair as a neighborhood home occupation subject to a special use permit when located more than 1.5 miles from a municipality that prohibits minor auto repair as a home occupation and subject to several standard conditions, including but not limited to a condition that the minor auto repair shall be conducted inside a building and a condition that the total building area occupied by the minor auto repair shall not exceed 1,500 square feet or more than 150% of the dwelling unit area, whichever is greater. Is there such a motion? Moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Ms. Furtado. Discussion on this. Susan, did you have anything that you wanted to say to start with?
There's really nothing new about this case at this point. We've had no further public comments or comments from any municipalities about this since we last presented this to you, so it's ready to be recommended one way or another.
Mr. Goss.
That was my question. This is what we were presented last meeting for a 30-day review, correct? No changes whatsoever? Okay.
Yep. Sorry, Ms. Furtado.
This is mostly just because I'm somewhat new. By what methodology do we solicit comment?
We send out mailings to adjacent neighbors. For a text amendment like this, we send it to all the municipalities. And so we wait for comment from them, and we also send it to pertinent agencies, relevant agencies, and we also advertise in the News Gazette. For a text amendment, it's the county-wide News Gazette rather than one of the smaller community papers.
And just as a follow-up, so when you do it in the News Gazette, it's in like the notices section?
It's in the legal notices section on Wednesdays typically.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we can take protests in terms of protests can be accepted from townships with planning commissions and also, I believe, municipalities for text amendments that can make it so that it increases the required vote at the county board level.
But we have no protests, so at this point in time, I suppose, is there still time to protest up till the vote? I don't remember, or is the protest?
I believe it has to be
I
within
just-
15 days of the.
I was thinking there was a time limit, so if it's not passed, it's probably pretty darn
It's close.
at least. Further discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. Move on then to 11, other business. We have the semi-annual review of closed session minutes. The information I was given that we got from the state's attorney's office is that there are no minutes closed session minutes that are ripe for review. So basically kind of a status quo. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Ms. Petrie. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes. Chair's report. Don't really have anything other than thanks all for coming. And designation of items to be placed on consent agenda. That would be 10A and 10B. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Marsh, seconded by Ms. Petrie. We're adjourned. Thank you.